Hey guys, I'm Greta, and I'm here to teach you the foundations of influencer marketing. Over the last 6 years, I've built 4 multi-million-dollar e-commerce startups that have generated over 8 figures between them. At the same time, I've grown my combined Instagram following to over 16 million followers. Having been on both sides of the market, as an influencer and as a brand, I've learnt a thing or 10 about influencer marketing. I've collaborated with thousands of influencers with my e-commerce brands, and I've also worked as an influencer for the likes of PayPal and Hewlett-Packard. So scratching my own itch, I created Hey Influencers. Hey is an invite-only platform where brands and influencers match to collaborate. Hey is a little bit like a dating app for brands and influencers, and that's for one main reason. The reason is that influencer marketing is all about relationships. The relationship that you're leveraging between an influencer and their audience, as well as the relationship that you're building between your brand and your influencers. And a relationship is not just a transaction. So while most other influencer platforms are marketplaces, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Marketplaces are all very well for the likes of cars and houses, but when it comes to people, and influencers are people at the end of the day, not a line on a marketing budget, it's all about relationships. So at Hey, we're doing things a little bit differently. We've built the world's first IRM, an influencer relationship management platform, which, like I said, works a lot more like a dating app. So on Hey, you can find the right influencers to collaborate with, reach out in a single tap, and influencers can do the same. If you both say hey, then you match and can chat to collaborate, and then we help you manage your workflow. So that's Hey Influencers in a nutshell. But outside of how Hey works, the other perk of running a company dedicated to influencer marketing is that now I've been able to watch hundreds of brands work with thousands of influencers, which has given me even further insight into the exact steps that you need to follow to create an effective and successful influencer marketing campaign. Now I've collaborated with Later.com, the #1 Instagram marketing platform, to bring you this 5-part mini course. I've personally been a big fan of Later for years, so I'm truly honoured to come together to bring you this course. But I really want to highlight here that Later is so much more than just a scheduling platform. So in this 5-part mini course, I'll cover some of these foundational steps and commonalities that I've seen arise across all of the successful influencer marketing campaigns that I've been involved in or overseen. This will help you get started or scale up your influencer marketing efforts while achieving the results that you actually want. So first things first, planning an influencer marketing campaign takes time and focus. So to get the most out of this course, you'll need to block out some time and commit to seeing it through. At the end of each lesson, there'll be a call to action to fill out a worksheet exercise, which will be included in the resources section for each lesson. And it's crucial for you to do these worksheets because this is where you'll develop the outcomes to apply to your own business. So let's dive into it now. Firstly, let's take a look at where the value of influencer marketing really lies. Influencers are becoming increasingly important as consumers trust brands less, tune out or actively block out direct advertising more, and have shorter and shorter attention spans. The average attention span is down from 12 seconds in the year 2000 to 8 seconds in 2017. That's less than a goldfish, and it's a 30% drop in less than 20 years. Given the fact that humans have been around for over 6 million years, that's kind of a big drop in that space of time. But it's not all doom and gloom. There is a solution. Influencers already have the attention of their audiences, but they've also unlocked something else, which is vital for brands. Something that can take years to build and seconds to destroy. Influencers have unlocked consumer trust. A report by Nielsen found that 92% of people trust recommendations from individuals, even if they don't know them, over brands. In a time where brand trust is at its lowest, with the rise of fake news, the introduction of the GDPR alongside more published incidences of data violation, brands have their jobs cut out for them. Influencers, however, are able to leverage their audience's pre-earned trust on a brand's behalf across multiple emotional checkpoints to create a more authentic connection between consumer and brand and scale consumer trust at an unprecedented rate. In short, as I like to put it, influencers humanize brands. And it's bringing this human factor to the brand that's important for the establishment of a longer-term relationship between brand and customer. This in turn will help both build brand affinity and brand equity. As Keely Nolan of Influence Inspired puts it, influencers offer an opportunity to create a long-term relationship with your target audience by establishing top-of-mind positioning through emotional marketing. By utilising the influencer's emotional connection to their audience and collaborating to create content that both fulfills the needs of the audience and communicates the brand's story and values, the brand can surface more frequently and easily for the customer during the purchasing process. So basically, if you think about it, if consumers associate your brand with somebody they already feel as though they know and trust, like influencers, it can build a lot of brand equity very quickly. So it's the fact that influencers don't only have their audience's attention, but they also have their trust that makes influencer marketing so appealing from an ROI perspective. Studies show that influencer marketing achieves, on average, 11 times the ROI of any other form of digital marketing, with an average of $6.50 made for every $1 invested. It's like putting $1 into a vending machine and it's spitting out $6.50 in return again and again. So whether you're running an e-commerce store or just want to see some quick sales and ROI, or you're building an e-commerce brand and understand the importance of cultivating a longer-term relationship with your customer, influencer marketing has something for everyone. Influencers are the key to building positive brand association, an emotional connection, trust, credibility, and a long-term relationship with your customers. Influencer marketing is also an incredible way to generate photo and video content, which your brand can repurpose and schedule with later for months to come after the campaign. So this is definitely something we want to focus on, right? Okay, so let's go deep now into how we can do that. In this lesson, I'm going to help you get started with the very first step in creating a successful influencer marketing campaign: planning and goal setting. First, we'll set our goal and then we'll work backward from there, or reverse engineer that goal to shape our entire campaign. For the purpose of this lesson, I'm going to simplify things for you a bit by focusing on our 3 main goals that I commonly use for my own influencer marketing campaigns: generating content, growing your social following, and driving sales. These 3 goals are what I view as the cornerstone goals of influencer marketing. This is mirrored in the user experience of Hey Influencers. So when you go to create a new campaign, the first step is to pick one of these 3 goals. You're then led into a specific template based on the goal that you pick to guide your campaign strategy. So let's start off with our first goal: generating content. We all know that our brands need a constant stream of content at all times, whether it's to post to our social channels, use for paid advertising, on our website as social proof, or in our emails. If your goal is to generate content, then you need to ask yourself how many pieces of influencer-generated content that you need to have created on a monthly basis. A product for content campaign is a great way to create influencer-generated content at scale in a cost-effective way. A product for content campaign is very similar to a product for post campaign. However, rather than posting the content to their social channels, the influencer simply submits the content directly to your brand. We had a really strong product for content campaign in the early days of the 5th, to the extent that we even had some of our top content creators on paid monthly content retainers. To this day, if you check out the 5th's Instagram feed, it's beautifully curated with a consistent aesthetic and a blend of brand and influencer generated content created using this exact campaign method. In terms of tracking content, it's useful to ask the influencer to submit their content directly to your brand via email, or by having them create a Dropbox or Google Drive folder to upload the content to, or otherwise via a platform like Hey Influencers. If this is something you'd like to do, I recommend trying to get around 30 pieces of influencer-generated content generated monthly so that you can constantly have new content to post to your social channels daily. Once you get this content, you can pull it all into your media library on later so that you can visually plan and schedule it. If your goal is to grow your social following, ask yourself how much you're looking to grow your social following by. For example, this could be a milestone like 10,000 Instagram followers so that you'd have the ability to add a swipe up link to your stories. A campaign that lends itself really effectively to growing your social following is an influencer-hosted Tag to Win giveaway. This is a campaign in which the influencer asks their followers to tag a friend on their post and follow your brand so as to go into the draw to win a prize. Using the example of the 5th again, with a single tag to win competition, we were able to grow our Instagram following by 20,000 followers in the space of 24 hours. We received over 80,000 comments tagging a friend on the post, and we were reported as the most engaged with brand profile on Instagram in the world that day. In this case, I'd strongly recommend jumping across to our Hey Influencers blog and having a read of our blog post on how to hold a tag to win giveaway, which will give you the exact caption that we used for this campaign, as well as other tips and examples. I'll provide a link to this post in the resources section for you below. Finally, if your goal is to generate sales, you want your influencers to provide a strong call to action to shop now. A great way to do this is by using personalized discount codes as an incentive to buy. This is a campaign whereby you offer paid macro influencers or unpaid micro influencers a personalized discount code for their followers to use on your store. For example, my code could be Gretta25, which my followers could use to save 25% off on your store or 25% off on a single SKU, for example. This is great for tracking as you can directly attribute the sales to that influencer. At the 5th, we received some amazing results when we found the right fit of influencers for our paid campaigns. One example is when we spent $1,000 on a YouTube video and received over $23,000 in attributed sales in a week alone. That's a 2,200% ROI. So as an action item for this lesson, I want you to pick one of the 3 goals and a suitable campaign. Otherwise, you can sign up to Hey Influencers for a 5-day free trial. We make this step super simple for you again by simply picking a goal and filling out a template to create your campaign. Once you've started to collect the content, it's time to repurpose it on Instagram and even on Pinterest using later. In this lesson, I'm going to take you through 2 steps in finding the right influencers for your brand. 1, defining your ideal customer by creating customer personas, and 2, conducting an audience analysis on an influencer to determine whether they're the right match. Now that we have our initial goal and collaboration type in mind from the last lesson, we can move on to the elements that go into creating a successful influencer marketing campaign by finding the right influencers to work with. Let's start with step 1. One way to identify your target audience and their wants and needs is by creating customer personas. According to HubSpot, a customer persona is a semi-fictional representation of your ideal customer based on market research and real data about your existing customers. When creating your customer personas, consider including customer demographics, behavioral patterns, motivations and goals, and pain points. The more detailed that you get, the better. Without creating customer personas, you'll only be guessing at the kinds of content that your audience wants to see. Your customer personas will help you identify where to focus your time to attract the most valuable customers to your business. In addition, they'll help you understand what to look for in an influencer and their audience. With Skinny Me Tea, for example, our customer personas fall into a few different categories, and they're based on both our understanding of who our target market is and real data about our existing customers. They all share the common goal of self-improvement. Some of their pain points include wanting to lose weight faster, safer, and more effectively, while spanning across different demographics: the university student, the office worker, the bride before her wedding, etc. So you can picture the kinds of influencers we'd be targeting off the back of these. So now we have an understanding of our ideal customer and our customer personas, we're going to dive into exactly what we're looking for in an influencer. This is where I use what I call the 3 R's formula to calculate this, and it reads reach by relevancy by relationship equals influence. Reach refers to both the influencer's social following as well as the number of views that they get on a post. In this formula, reach is the easiest to measure as it's a quantitative figure. Relevancy is a little harder to calculate as it's qualitative. We want to take into account here the influencer's niche, including their main areas of expertise, interests, skills, and hobbies that they're actively posting about. And finally, relationship refers to the relationship the influencer has with their audience. This is a form of brand affinity, which is directly related to the credibility, authenticity, and engagement with their audience. Relationship is the most difficult to calculate, but it's one of the best indicators of an influencer's influence. So you can use things like the influencer's engagement rate, especially the comments. Relationships are built through two-way communication, so influencers who are responsive to their audiences will have a stronger relationship with their audience. According to some research by Later, generally you want to see an engagement rate of 2 to 3% on influencer posts. A ratio of 4 to 6% is excellent, while posts in the high 10s or 20s are considered viral. A great example of an influencer who has an almost cult-like following with huge credibility, authenticity and trust is Sarah Stevenson of Sarah's Day, who we've worked with at The Fifth. In terms of reach, Sarah has a massive dedicated following on both YouTube and Instagram. In terms of her relationship with her followers, Sarah's built a deep emotional connection with her followers. She's real, she's raw, she's authentic, she's relatable, and she's human. Sarah's just as comfortable discussing her vulnerabilities and struggles as her successes and wins. This has allowed her to create such a strong emotional connection with her followers. So after launching multiple e-commerce brands and going through this process again and again, I realized how time-consuming it is finding influencers. So when I created Hey Influencers, one of my main goals was to make this step a lot more efficient and streamlined. On the app, outreach is made super simple. You simply hey the influencers that you want to work with, and if they want to work with you too, you match and can chat to collaborate. You can filter through thousands of invite-only influencers on our platform by things like demographic data and engagement. As an action item for this lesson, if you're doing this process manually, I want you to come up with a list of influencers that you're going to want to work with before we cover how to reach out to them in the next lesson. You can use the worksheet for this lesson to define your customer personas, and we've also provided assessment criteria for your influencer selection based off the 3 R's. Otherwise, you can easily save time by signing up for a 5-day free trial of Hey Influencers, and we'll have some resources for you for further reading in the resources section as well. So go ahead, do that now, and I'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, I'm going to cover how you can reach out to influencers on behalf of your brand. The way that you reach out to influencers is really important as it will determine whether or not the influencer ends up working with you. There are definitely best practices when it comes to approaching influencers to work with your brand. First up, keep your reach out brief and to the point. Influencers are often busy people and they receive brand reach outs all day, every day. So if they see a huge chunk of text, it might put them off right away. My next tip is to try to spark influencer interest right away. For example, if there are any exciting or unusual elements involved in the collaboration, like travel, try to get this into the email as soon as possible. Again, they get so many of these emails, so they'll be scanning through the main points before they read the email properly, so make sure that they stand out. Include why you decided to reach out to them and why they're a good fit for your brand. Compliments on their feed, past work, or creative will help here. Next, you want to introduce your brand and how you're different. This helps the influencer to position you amongst all the other brands, potentially even your competitors that have reached out to them in the past, and understand how you do things differently. Provide any interesting campaign details here. For example, if the campaign has a social cause or charitable aspect, as well as being upfront and transparent about what they can expect from you in terms of compensation, whether it's product or payment or both. So we don't want to be pushy, we don't want to assume anything, we don't want to send generic emails, we don't want to offer exposure in the place of payment, and finally, don't try to control all of what they're doing in their creative. After all, you chose the influencer for who they are and what they can bring to the table. And by micromanaging things, you're taking that away from them. So if you send an outreach message and you don't receive a reply, then we want to follow up. But we want to do this in a masterful way. The aim of the follow-up is to move the influencer from receiving your outreach message or the product or the payment through to posting, creating content, attending an event, or whatever you initially agreed upon. A follow-up is to gently remind them that you as a brand have fulfilled your end of the deal, sent the product and payment, and now it's time for them to fulfill their end. Following up with an influencer is especially important in unpaid product-only campaigns, and your campaign completion rate, aka whether the influencer posts or not, will vary significantly upon this step. If you're following up with an unpaid product-only campaign, you can't force an influencer to post, even if that's the agreement that you made to begin with, as they're not being paid for their creative reach and time. When following up, the only thing that you can do is be polite but persistent. If you're not polite, they'll simply ignore you. One tip is to structure this like a reminder, like maybe the influencer's just forgotten to post or hasn't had time yet. So you assume positive intent here. Maybe they're a little stuck on what to post, or maybe they need a little more extra motivation. If you're following up on a paid campaign, you're able to be much more direct, as you often have a timeline to meet and a budget to spend. It's useful to send reminder-style follow-ups before any key dates that you've set out in your deliverables. If the influencer is expected to submit their content to you for approval before the post goes live, you might like to remind them the day before this, as well as reminding them for the date and time for the content to go live. One of my favorite features on Later is that once you sync your media library, so your Google Drive or Dropbox with the app, you can include instructions for the influencer to load their content into these folders, and once they're done, it'll appear right in your media library. Another tactic, if they still haven't replied to you, is asking another brand or influencer that you're in contact with to introduce you to them, as warm introductions go a long way, especially for busy people. So paid or unpaid, it's important to keep note of your influencer outreach so that there's no double handling. As an action item for this lesson, it's time to write out your outreach message. I've given you an example that follows the basic principles that I've discussed in this lesson. If you're on Hey Influencers, this step is super simple and easy. Simply send them a message on the chat introducing yourself and letting them know what the deliverables are for the campaign. So go ahead, do that now, and I'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we'll be covering writing an influencer brief. When it comes to writing a brief, it's important that you're upfront and clear about the deliverables required in exchange for your product or payment. This is what the influencers will refer to when they need to be reminded about what they need to do. As a minimum, your brief should include your brand or product background, the campaign type, the reason for the collaboration, and any other important details, like for example, whether the collaboration is to promote a product launch or a Black Friday sale, for example. Compensation, so what you'll be offering the influencer as payment, so either a product or a monetary payment, and the deliverables, so what the influencer is going to be doing for you in return. Your brief can also include some creative direction or instructions for the kind of content that you'd like created and any do's or don'ts. I've also put together a few extra tips that I have for you when putting together your brief. Don't try to convince the influencer to post for exposure. This is because you might actually offend an influencer by saying this. The most important thing to be able to execute a really impactful unpaid collaboration is relationship building. Given how many messages influencers get on a daily basis from brands asking them to collaborate, having a good relationship with influencers allows you to cut through the noise, as they're much more likely to say yes to someone who they've engaged with before and has built a relationship with them. The next tip is to get creative with compensation. In addition to this, as the influencer marketing space evolves, the need to go above and beyond in your brand experience of your unpaid collaborations does too. Try and think of creative ways that you can go above and beyond to make the experience even better for your influencers. Some simple ways to do this are to include brand merch, so it might be a branded sweater or hat, for example, host an influencer lunch or event, shout them a gym membership, or give them an Uber Eats voucher, for example. These are all things that can be expense to your business or might come from existing relationships that you already have. The next tip is to keep your briefing document as simple as possible. Again, something to keep in mind with unpaid collaborations is that because the influencer isn't being compensated for their time and reach, they're not required to post. This is why you don't want to put too much detail into an unpaid briefing document, as the influencer isn't being paid to read it, and they're much less likely to take part if you have way too many guidelines and requirements. If you're on Hey Influencers, this part is super easy. Remember in the first lesson when I mentioned that we have a specific template based on the goal that you pick? In the campaign template, there's also a section where you write your brief, so the influencer will already be aware of the terms of the collaboration when you match. So as an action item for this lesson, consider the points discussed and use the worksheet to write your brief. There'll be an example of a brief from a brand on Hey there too. If you're doing it manually, remember not to include your brief in the first email, but after the influencer's already confirmed that they'll be collaborating with you. So go ahead, do that now, and I'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, it's time to start measuring the ROI or return on investment of your influencer marketing campaign. ROI measures the return on investment relative to the investment's cost. In its simplest form, measuring ROI is looking at what we did, what the results were, and whether it was worth it from a time, resources, and monetary investment perspective. In this way, we can measure the success of the campaign by tracking results and measuring them against your campaign spend in terms of time, resources, and sales. Something that I want to bring up here before we get started that's really important is that while of course you'll see results from an individual post or campaign, the effects of influencer marketing will also show over time. They have a compounding effect. So at my brands, rather than looking directly at the ROI that we're going to get from each individual influencer post or collaboration, we look at the ROI achieved across a campaign as a whole. So now let's look back at the initial goals that we determined and see how well they were achieved. When it comes to reporting on growing our social following, we're going to look at follower growth on the social platform that the campaign was live on, for example, your Instagram account. As Tegan West of Scrunch puts it, while this might not equate to sales in the short term, new social media followers enter the top of the sales funnel and will eventually, whether it's in days, weeks, or years, become a paying customer and loyal members of your tribe. Don't discount a growth in social followers, as it's still an important aspect in community development and growth. When it comes to calculating the ROI of an increase in followers over time, if you know what your customer lifetime value is, and you know what your conversion rate for a social media follower is, then you can begin to put a monetary value on your followers. You should also look at metrics like campaign reach, post impressions, brand mentions, and social engagement. So likes, comments, saves, shares, depending on the social channel that your campaign's live on. I used to do all of this manually, but now that I use Later, all of my analytics are available in the one place, including my Instagram stories and link in bio analytics. If your target audience has seen and interacted with your brand, they may have converted in other ways too. Moving on to generating content, we want to look at the number of pieces of content generated as well as the quality of the content. A couple of good indicators for the quality of the content is the number of times that you're able to repurpose the content and its popularity in terms of engagement. And finally, moving on to sales, were you able to directly attribute sales to the campaign? Directly attributed sales will be from the influencer's unique discount code or through any personalized trackable links that you've used in the campaign. Over time, the evergreen effects of influencer marketing should show through an increase in customer lifetime value. Calculating ROI directly from attributed sales is relatively simple. Later also allows you to integrate with Shopify so that all the metrics are in the one place. Some other metrics that you might want to report on include calculating a cost per engagement and website data, so an uplift in things like direct and social media traffic. In terms of the cost per engagement, this is calculated by comparing the money spent on a particular campaign to the number of engagements that you receive for it, so likes and comments on all associated posts. Some people like to include other engagement metrics like saves and shares, for example. Just be consistent and report on the same metrics across all of your campaigns. In terms of website data, we're looking for differences in some of your key metrics there, like new users, unique users, total sessions, total page views, time spent on your site, and referral traffic, especially from social and direct. As an action item for this lesson, I want you to fill out the worksheet attached with some ways in which you can track and monitor the effectiveness of your influencer marketing campaigns. So go ahead, do that now, and I'll see you in the next lesson.